Testing. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Hi, can everyone hear me? All right, looks like, yeah, thank you. All right, so Stephen with the request, okay. The detailed buff, thank you for your comment. First off, I would really appreciate you just sharing your name and where you're watching from. It's nice to get an overview of where everyone's watching. We'll give it a few minutes before we begin. Pompano Beach, Florida, Washington State. All right, so I'm based out in California. Okay, so we got the detailed buff from Washington State, Stephen from Florida. Let's give it a few more minutes before we begin. Looks like we got a couple folks joining, but thank you all for taking your time on this Sunday to watch this live stream. All right, so Mike with the request as well. So NBIS. We'll cover all of that. Okay, so we'll give it another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. But definitely put your questions and comments in the chat. I'll try to cover every question there is. Definitely the Bitcoin chart, Ian. We'll definitely pull up the Bitcoin chart as well. I have technicals I want to share with everyone. Definitely just high level summary of Bitcoin right now, hovering at 107,000. We'll cover all of that. Okay, so happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you for joining. It looks like we got people from different states coming in as well. Thank you, Ian, for the comments there. All right, so we're starting off with Bitcoin at 107,000. Most of you are wondering, what do the technicals look like? We'll cover all of that. I have a lot of technical predictions I want to cover, but just go through some of the updates first. So we got Ian from Washington, definitely some nice folks from everywhere. All right, so is anyone going to the Bitcoin conference? I'll be headed out to Las Vegas Bitcoin conference, so hopefully, we'll be able to see each other if you all go. All right, so let's go and get started. So first post I want to just call out is the number of Bitcoin held by global ETF. So let's just take a look. I mean, when we look at this visual, what is it telling us? I mean, just look at the amount of Bitcoin BlackRock holds onto. The CEO, Larry. He's racing against strategy right now. I mean, look at how much Bitcoin they have, 655,000 Bitcoin. Fidelity is about less than a third away. even like Bitwise, not even close to that number. But think about it, $71 billion. We're now hearing Bank of America, we're hearing Chase, the biggest financial bank, getting into this arena as well, allowing for customers, Chase, customers to buy Bitcoin. I mean, just every day, BlackRock has been just stacking sats. They're spending hundreds of $1 million, with the inflows of money going into IBIT ETF. And what is BlackRock doing? They're buying up Bitcoin. So right now, 655,000. Strategy is like 578,000. The U.S. government, they haven't even announced their Bitcoin Act of 2025, where they're planning on buying 1 million Bitcoin in the next 5 years. There's not enough supply to go around, but definitely some huge, upside with where we are right now, just with overall Bitcoin markets. Here's one thing I want to just point out. HODL 15 gives us some overview, like 21 million Bitcoin. We know that there's about 8.2 billion people in the world. That comes out to 250,000 Satoshis, which equates to 0.0025 Bitcoin for every person who's given their share to buy Bitcoin. So like, let's say if everyone in this world, 8.2 billion people, are studying Bitcoin, embracing Bitcoin, that will be $265 per person buying, their fair share of, Bitcoin. Just put that into context. And when you look at how scarce Bitcoin really is, just look at this visual. One icon is 10 million people. Global population is like 8.2 billion. Total Bitcoin supply, 21 million. So just two blues out of how many pinks are there? We're still early in the game. That's the thing. Even though price is like at the level of 100,000 and above, we're still early. There's still Bitcoin out there. Stack Satoshis, stack strats, strap up, because we're gonna be going to the moon. All right, looks like we got more and more people joining. So MBIS definitely an AI cloud-based play. Their revenue's been going up 385%, just year over year growth. Definitely a shining AI stock with liquidity in there. But we'll definitely cover more about the stock. But definitely AI is something that is looking very solid. Looks like Katie's joining as well. Thank you, Katie, for joining. Yes, I feel your pain there. We'll cover the technicals of the miners. One thing we got to keep in mind is that the miners had a big run up, like CleanSpark, at that low $6. Riot, Mara, sub $9, sub $6. It went up by about 70%. So definitely some healthy consolidation. We see some decoupling. Why is it that Bitcoin's going up when the miners and strategy aren't really going up? Just, sometimes the stocks take a breather. That's the thing. But we have to keep in mind, here's the thing. These stocks are hedged against Bitcoin. Here's an interesting visual from Plan B. The correlation, we're looking at regression R squared, 0.87. So when we think about Bitcoin and how correlated it is with the S&P 500 index, Plan B is posting that once we get to 7,000 for the S&P, which is somewhere around here, we're going to be around that, that $300,000 for price of Bitcoin. So definitely some huge upside. S&P 500, it's close to that 6,000. In fact, it broke through 6,000 in the beginning of the year. It was over 6,000, but definitely, once S&P goes up by, another 1,000, Bitcoin has that potential to get up to that 300K. So because we have Trump in the administration, I do think that it's really going to be a time where the economy is going to roar back. And for those reasons, Bitcoin is going to have a big breakout. All right. So let's just continue here. So Cantonese Cat, he posts the weekly Gann chart. He's been posting this since 2024, and I highly recommend following Cantonese Cat. He puts out really great content on X, so definitely follow him if you haven't already done so. And he's saying, and I still think that we're probably where the arrow's at after an arc breakout and back test. So, just looking at the visual, what do we see for every consolidation period? After a consolidation period, a step up. After a consolidation period, a step up. After a consolidation period, a step up. So definitely, I do see that arrow that we do see back in November playing out with where we are right now in the month of May. So some nice visual looking at it from a long-term perspective. Bitcoin just keeps going up. So let's say if you don't have any Bitcoin, or if you do have Bitcoin, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. It's even millionaires can't even buy a Bitcoin right now because of the price, but you can buy a portion of Bitcoin. It's definitely the ultimate safe haven. Don't look at it through the lens of it's so expensive. It'll only get more expensive. I mean, you scale out 13 years ago. I mean, when it was 700, 1300, you think it's expensive during that time, but what happened? It kept going up. You see it go up to like 15,000, 50,000. You think it's expensive, but it just keeps going up. So continue to dollar cost average. It doesn't matter the price. As you keep dollar cost averaging, you'll win. All right, so we're looking at top assets by market cap. Bitcoin right now at $2.1 trillion. Right behind Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft. As soon as Bitcoin price gets to like 150,000 per Bitcoin, it's gonna run up to number two. Beating all of the Mag 7 companies. Think about that for a second. Companies that have Bitcoin on their treasury, like Strategy, the Bitcoin miners. Think about those companies. The fact that Bitcoin will just be like the number two top asset class by market cap, those companies that are leveraging Bitcoin on their balance sheet have huge return on investment for the growth of its market capitalization, as well as for shareholders. And for those reasons, market cap will start growing. So like Strategy, for example, hundreds of billions of dollars right now, it's eventually gonna morph into a $1 trillion company, multi-trillion dollar company, similar to the Mag 7s. But one point, once Strategy gets into S&P 500, it's going to start racing, becoming like much higher in terms of market cap than the Magnificent Seven. And as Bitcoin takes the leap, bypassing gold at one point, think about companies that hold on to a boatload of Bitcoin. That's just going to drive things up. All right, so just looking at the chat, we got folks joining in from Washington, from Florida. Thank you all for joining. Hope you all are having a great Sunday. Looks like detail buff, just with Mara conviction. I know Katie's big on CleanSpark. So put it in the chat. What stocks would you like technicals on, and what stocks do you believe have the potential for run-ups in this case? And put your requests in the chat. We'll go through all of the questions that you have. We're looking at digital asset policy intelligence. It's interesting because when we had the SBR announced, there weren't too many orange. It was mainly all black states. Orange is truly the new black right now. I mean, we haven't got Hawaii and these states over here, but as we look at the overall race between all of these states, let's take a look. Arizona passed, New Hampshire passed. I mean, they got Bitcoin enacted into law where now these states are able to buy Bitcoin. We heard a lot of news around Texas, in that it's in the chamber 2, and now it's going to the table for the government to sign into law. As soon as we hear that, it's going to be a big time, run up. I think, Texas, because of the population there, because of the amount of companies there, like mining Bitcoin, there's definitely a huge upside with Texas getting SBR. But We haven't even heard states buying Bitcoin yet, or even the United States government buying Bitcoin. Once that happens, think about financial institutions. Right now, financial institutions are front running everything like BlackRock, Fidelity. They realize that eventually Trump's going to approve the Bitcoin Act, get that passed through legislation. That's why they're front running right now, along with like MSTR and like the new Bitcoin Treasury companies coming out, like the hot 21 Capital, CEP. You have MetaPlanet, coming out buying like thousands of Bitcoin now. So a lot of companies, financial institutions, even retails like us, we're front running right now because we know at one point the government's going to try to hodl Bitcoin, and at one point we're going to be like, we're going to realize that this blue factor, we want to fall under this population where we'll at least hold on to some degree of Bitcoin. Here's an interesting post. Sailor, he posts, I only buy Bitcoin with money I can't afford to lose. So similar to what the CEO of BlackRock said, he said it's risky not to be buying Bitcoin right now. Why? Because fiat money only gets weaker and weaker, while Bitcoin is accretive. It only gets more and more valuable. It's like rare candy. I don't know if you folks ever like play Pokemon, but rare candy is just like Bitcoin. It only gets rare. All right. So looking at the chat, we got Mara, we got Scrooge with Mara. Okay, and then Katie, G Crypto showed a chart on Bitcoin going to 129,000 by June, only a couple of weeks away. I'm not sure we see a big pump, but hoping. Um, so Katie, that 129,000, that's very reasonable because even cryptos are us. George, I don't know if you all follow him or not, but I highly recommend following George. Cryptos are us. He's forecasting, sometime in June Q2, we're going to be somewhere around that. So we have until end of June. So we have like 5 weeks from now. We're going to hover somewhere around that 120 to 140K. That's where once we reach that 140K, we may get a slight pullback, with support, coming back down to like the 110, 120K. But as soon as you get to that top of like 140K, and then you get that new support at like 110, 120K established, that's where, he's forecasting end of the year, sometime in like Q3, Q4 transition, will be somewhere around that price of $250,000 for the price of Bitcoin. All right, so let's continue. So it'll be interesting to hear how much MSTR Michael Saylor announces tomorrow, but we continue to see the orange dots. In fact, the dots are so big, it's covering up all the blue lines right now. And a lot of people are wondering, why is it that, price of Bitcoin, why is it that it's going, it's going up, but, why is it that, the miners, strategy, why is it going down? So we're looking at technicals of, Bitcoin on the hourly. So on the hourly, more on the short-term scale, we see it from like May 13th through 16th. So this is like 2 weeks of, performance. Each candle represents an hour trajectory. So it's not so zoomed in, but it gives you an overview of where we are. So definitely for most of what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, we've been hovering above the Ichimoku cloud, above the green cloud. That's where it's like, clear blue skies, sunshine and rainbows. But as soon as we cross through and we get underneath the cloud where we start seeing red clouds, that's where it becomes, rainy and cloudy, where we get more of that gravitational pull down. Now it's going to be very important to see how we break through this cloud. So, any slight uptick up, like if we get into that 108,300, we're already hovering back into that cloud. So it'll be interesting to see, whether today, tomorrow, we can break through that Ichimoku cloud, on the near term approach. But definitely very healthy consolidation. We've been going up since April from like low 70 to now, 112,000. some huge upside after that, heavy bull flag consolidation since November to like, the first half of the year. But the fact that we've consolidated for that long, that's only healthy consolidation. And what we're seeing right now is very minimal volatility. I mean, like from 112,000 now to like, close to 108,000. We're looking very healthy, bullish activity with Bitcoin. And when we look at it on a daily chart, here's one thing to keep in mind. Just look at the performance on the daily. We're above the Ichimoku cloud right now. It's sunshine and rainbows after we broke through that heavy cloud, that big time red cloud that was hovering above us for many months. That's why, the miners, got beat down because of this, pink cloud here. It was like cloudy, heavy storm and, cloudy days where the rain really pushed down the price of, like stocks, even like strategy, the big three Bitcoin miners. But what happened since we broke out, where we started seeing Bitcoin run up, the miners started running up, as well as strategy running up. Strategy went from like 200 to like 400. Miners went up by about like 70%. So even though we're seeing like the last week with some slight pullback, I wouldn't worry so much. Why? Because it's only coil up, prime for a big run up. All right, so it looks like we got more people joining. So thank you all for joining. I hope this is helping you all with the technicals. Definitely put your questions in the chat. Which stocks are you forecasting that's going to be running up? Is anyone going to be going to the Bitcoin conference? It'll be very nice seeing, like the miners speak. Even Sailor, even JD Vance presenting. It'll be definitely nice to see all of that in real time. All right, so we got folks from all the different states. Some Mara investors, CleanSpark, it is a bit higher than Riot. Katie, I don't know, 200 seems high, but I would love to see it. One thing to keep in mind, Katie, is that Bitcoin, I mean, it's not even over like 100% gain with where we are right now. That's only like a 90% gain. So it's not too far out when you think about Eon. Why is it time for a big run up for Bitcoin? So that's a great question. I think it's always important to understand the why. And of course, always take information as guidance. And it's important to understand why you think that, certain things are going to be running up. But based on CoinMarketCap, think about this. Bitcoin's growth is fueled by unprecedented institutional interest with 121 billion inflows tied to ETF. Market trends reflect a shift towards substantial institution adoption, as highlighted by BlackRock's inflows. So that's what's really driving Bitcoin price up. It comes down to the change in the psychology. Everyone is beginning to embrace Bitcoin. Financial institutions are buying it up left and right. Bank of America, Chase, they're all running towards, buying up Bitcoin. Crypto is the name of the game now. It's changing how we look at the US dollar. I think for companies that don't embrace Bitcoin and crypto, that's where you're taking on a risk. And that, I think it goes hand in hand with, crypto and AI right now, getting into that digital space with innovation. So we're definitely very early on. And once Bitcoin starts running, it gets adopted, these sectors are going to just shoot up. So I hope that answers the why question. All right. So in the chat, we got more folks. All right. So Katie, the banana zone. So Lyridon, when we see CleanSpark $20 again, it may be, I don't know, can it be next week? Can it be sometime in June? But, all I know is CleanSpark right now, there's bulletin boards in Las Vegas, even at the airport. So CleanSpark is hosting, the Bitcoin conference as well. So in one section of the Bitcoin conference. So there's definitely, big marketing going on with CleanSpark, but $20, it's not a matter of if. I definitely do see that. It's only a matter of when. FASB accounting rules. It's all changing now. So I think Q2 is going to be a big time point for the miners to show that they are in this business sector because there's money to be made. All right, so let's just continue, but definitely put your comments, questions in the chat. I'd love to just get more updates on what everyone is thinking, what your questions are, what your forecasts are. But here's an interesting take. Cantor Fitzgerald. So, he bought 1 million MSTR stocks for $326 million in just the last couple of months. So now they have 4.65 million shares. So close to $2 billion worth of strategy stocks. So when you think about, Cantor Fitzgerald's overall investment strategy, they have half of their investments in strategy. So when you hear about keep your enemies closer, well, Cantor Fitzgerald, I mean, the father, he's the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. So he's part of, the Trump administration, and his son is now running Cantor Fitzgerald Financial Institution. So Bitcoin price goes up, Cantor Fitzgerald wins. Strategy stocks goes up, Cantor Fitzgerald wins. With 21 Capital being created, with Bitcoin price goes up, Cantor wins. So definitely there's win-win situations now. Even South Korean wealth manager, security assets, they're buying up, strategy stocks as well, worth over $140 million. So when you look at, why are people buying strategy stocks? Because they realize that, strategy has a boatload of Bitcoin, and when Bitcoin price goes up, strategy stocks, it could potentially shoot up even more. And we've seen historically that even though Bitcoin price goes up by like 50%, strategy tends to outperform that. And a lot of people are wondering, like, why is it that strategy has been going down when Bitcoin's been going up? One thing to keep in mind is, when you look at it from a year-to-date performance, strategy's already gone up by about 100%. Bitcoin hasn't even done that yet. So, I wouldn't look at it, through the lens of like last week's performance and all of that, but just kind of scale out and see how strategy has been performing. All right, so let's talk more about just Bitcoin mining. So Blake Lewis, he posted something interesting today. Next week for Bitcoin mining, here's the roundup. Mara stock popped despite Q1 miss, cutting costs going green. Riot mined 463 Bitcoin in April, reserves at 19.2 thousand Bitcoin, getting close to that 20,000 Bitcoin with HODL. Oh my God, that's huge numbers. Iron aims for 50 exahash plus expanding into AI HPC, even though Iron doesn't take on that HODL approach. Core's back from bankruptcy from 8.7 billion AI data deal. BitDeer scaling up in Texas, Norway, Bhutan, seal miner rigs coming. So lots of people would really like the seal miner. Texas moves to start a state Bitcoin reserve. So we're not bullish enough. Definitely some huge upside. I think, with AI, getting more and more demand, we're seeing like quantum computing making big runs recently. In AI, definitely we see like, NVIDIA, AMD, all of the big time, companies, they're running up as well. And we're going to see a lot of the Bitcoin hybrid plays also run up. But here's an interesting take from Crypto Klepto. Mara holds more Bitcoin than the lesser Bitcoin miners combined. So obviously, we know Mara has close to 50,000 Bitcoin. Riot has, close to 20,000. CleanSpark, big numbers as well, 12,000. Hut 8, 10,000. BitDeer, Bitfarm, Cypher Hive, not even that much. So I wouldn't even factor in the last four. But definitely some big numbers. Mara with the big count as well. And as soon as we have the Q2 earnings report, it's going to be fireworks for the big HODL companies like Mara, Riot, CleanSpark. Mara at close to 49,000, Riot close to 20,000, CleanSpark, getting close to that 15,000. So it's only going to be a win-win situation for these miners as well. All right, let's take a look at the chat, see how things are going. All right, so Halo Bomb, is this the Bitcoin mining investor support group? Well, I've been covering the Bitcoin miners, quite extensively. Bitcoin as well, strategy as well. I don't have a thing against a certain sector. I do think that everything goes hand in hand together. It's part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. You can't talk Bitcoin if without the Bitcoin miners, and without Bitcoin miners, you wouldn't have Bitcoin. So it's definitely all an ecosystem. Congratulations on that, Katie. Quantum computing, QBTS, definitely made some huge run-ups. What is your expectation for a Bitcoin price pullback? So, Ian, great question. While we do see Bitcoin, going up, like what is the likelihood for it to go down below 100,000? It's quite possible. I mean, where we are currently at 107,476, we went from like 75,000 to over 112,000. So how low can it go? It can go down to 102,000. It could even go down even further. We don't know what the magic 8 ball is, but let's say if we were to scale out, let's say on the weekly, what do we see during the last bull cycle? We saw that double top happen, right? April 2021, 65,000, and then it went to like 29,000. Well, of course, there was a lot of volatility during this time. Financial institutions weren't buying, but what happened? It shot back up to that 70,000. So it had a double top peak. Question is, are we gonna, are we at that double top peak right now? So if that's the case, Eon, we may very well have a double top, but I really don't think that we're gonna experience that same trajectory of a double top. Why? Because when you look at it, I mean, we haven't really even peaked yet from the last halving cycle. I mean, we just got to the prior resistance, not too long ago. So are we going to get a double top? I don't think so. I think we're just consolidating, and we're going to be in price discovery phase where we're going to see new heights for Bitcoin. All right, so Halo Bomb, we're definitely going to cover some Riot technicals as well. So what would be a good smash buy re-entry? So Eon, that's a great question. I think the key thing is time in the market versus timing the market. Definitely always have a reserve to dollar cost average, and when, let's say, it goes down even further, you can add more to that smash buy entry, like what you're saying. But even at these prices, I wouldn't wait to buy Bitcoin. Just keep buying consistently over the course of time, and when it goes down, then increase the dollar cost average in. Bitcoin always goes up in the long term course. Yes, we experience volatility, but this sucker just keeps trending up. So you're just going to keep winning. Why? Just look at this picture. This explains why Bitcoin will always go up. There's an attraction towards Bitcoin. Think of it like like very expensive purses like LV, Prada. All of the expensive purses. The branding is so strong, and the value only goes up. Bitcoin, there's only 21 million out there, so. Even if it goes down, take advantage of that. It's going to go back up. And now you got banks involved. You got, the president speaking about Bitcoin. You got JD Vance soon to be like at the Bitcoin conference. They're all advocates of Bitcoin. Yes, it's going to go down, but when it goes down, it's just going to go back up, and we don't have that magic 8 ball to know like when's the best price to get in. Just keep dollar cost averaging. Why? Because it's ultimately a race towards having an adequate amount of Bitcoin before it's too late. All right, so we're going to cover some technicals. technicals first. So, I just want to just cover, strategy first. So we've seen Bitcoin, currently on the weekly, we see some nice run-ups here. Are we going to get a double top? I'm thinking no. I'm thinking we're going to consolidate and we're going to be more in that price discovery phase. So 3 months of like heavy rundowns, we're going to be stepping up to the new price territory. I'm thinking somewhere around that 120, 140K in Q2 in this next 5 weeks. And then, we may have a slight pullback and then, climb up to new levels. But as for strategy, key thing is on the daily candles, we're above that Ichimoku cloud as well. It's key to see the price continue to hover around this range, consolidate. As we consolidate, that'll prime us to get back to that prior resistance of 550. But I do think strategy has potential for a breakout into that four-digit range is where I'm anticipating. On the weekly chart, we're seeing a cup and handle form on the weekly. Key thing is we're seeing a sine wave, building up here. We're going to see a green volcano be established. We see ebbs and flows on the weekly with the MACD, and we just had that MACD crossing. We're still above that Ichimoku cloud. Let's say on the weekly, if we get lower into that cloud range, we may get some pullbacks, but I don't think we're going to have that. I do think that because we had that huge drawdown in this bull flag for many months now, we're at that precipice for a cup and handle forming. In fact, we do see a cup and handle forming right now, where we're seeing that cup handle be formed before we potentially might see like a V shape at this point. So a short squeeze is very imminent with strategy as well. Let's talk about the Bitcoin miners. So what are we looking at when we're looking at this? We're looking at both Mara, Riot, and CleanSpark. So, Mara we see in green and red. We see Riot in the pink, CleanSpark in the purple. We're seeing very similar performance. It's difference in the price points. Obviously, Mara is a bigger company, so the price is reflected to be higher. But what are we seeing with the performance? We see that these miners, it's been going down since November. Mara at like $30. CleanSpark at like $17. Riot at like $15 since beginning of November. Since then, 6 months of bleed outs. We've had a beat down for like half a year. Yes, Katie, you're right. We are looking at disappointment. I mean, it's like we're bag holding at this point. But you know what? Just remain patient. Don't give up. I know, it can get very emotional. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm like bag holding this while Bitcoin is going up. But, when we invest in like the mining sector, there's a lot of velocity, not so much torque, but velocity, meaning like when it runs, it can run very fast. So that's why it's difficult to time the market with these plays, because when it shoots up very fast. Key thing is we're seeing, based on the technicals like Riot, CleanSpark, Mara breaking out of that, that bull flag. It got out of that bull flag. In fact, when you look at the 50 to 200-day SMA, it broke through that in early April. During the low point when the relative strength was like at 20, MACD was bearish convergence, but we're seeing the divergence between the blue and the orange. Definitely some reversal candles, and now on the daily we've broken out of that Ichimoku cloud. That's a key thing. But when you scale out on the weekly, like let's say if we push it out to the week, we're below that Ichimoku cloud. But I do foresee that here's the indicator we want to look at on the weekly. We're seeing that intersection point. I do think that we're getting green volcanoes being established. We're going to have a big banana volcano over here, and we're going to pop out of that Ichimoku cloud. Why? You look at it on the daily, you're already seeing that. So it's only a matter of time where we're going to, because on the daily, on the near term, we're seeing MACD be established. We're going to see that weekly MACD show signs that we're breaking out from a long-term perspective, and we're going to be having clear blue skies where we're going to see sunshine and rainbows for the mining sector. We look at seasonality. 2024 seasonality, it was a big underperformance, but I think 2025, as we head towards the end of the year, we're going to see big performance, outperformance for the mining sector. All right, so looking at the comments, okay, so Katie, that's funny. Yes, such disappointment, just kidding. Halo Bomb, Scrooge, high operation costs, retail sentiment, tariffs, so volatile, dilution as well. Yes, the mining sector can be tough. You got more miners now, you got operational costs, you got people where you got to pay your bills for electricity, for man overhead costs and all that. But think about this though. The Bitcoin miners, they're mining at costs where, let's say, for every Bitcoin mined, is it somewhere around 40, 50,000. But like, let's say once Bitcoin price goes up to like 200K, your cost for Bitcoin is 25%. You're getting a 75% discount. Of course, that's before all of the expenses and all that, but that's just for power capacity costs. So I definitely do see that the Bitcoin miners, especially those that have a big HODL like Mara, Riot, CleanSpark, there's potential for it to have big run-ups as Bitcoin price is in this whole new discovery phase. People are wondering, oh, should I wait until Bitcoin price goes down? But when will it go down? Yes, it can go down, but let's say if it goes up like from like 150 to 200K, then you're going to be hitting your head like, why didn't I buy? Why did I like expect for it to go down and then buy big? That's the dilemma. But I wouldn't question the Bitcoin performance. Why? Because over time it will continue to go up. All right, so let's see what questions, requests anyone has here in the chat. So what is everyone invested in? So let's see. So between the three Bitcoin, big time companies like Strategy or the miners, what do you think has potential for a run up for the rest of 2025? Which one has the most upside, or do you think that all have upside? Are you invested in all three? Put it in the chat. All right, Bitcoin hovering at 107,000. It's such a beast now. All right, so Eon is forecasting Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin definitely has really changed things. Okay, we got Katie. I'm all in on CleanSpark, 6,500 shares. CleanSpark, I think it's going to have a big run up soon, along with the miners. Bernstein analyst reaffirmed rating $30 price target for Pfizer on May 20th, following the company's recent disclosed $6 billion licensing deal. Oh, interesting. So Pfizer, yeah, Pfizer has potential. I mean, it's a big company; it's never going to go away. Because the stock price has been beaten down so much, it has potential to run up. I'm with you on that. So, be on the lookout for stocks that have been beaten down so much. Yeah, 6,500 for CleanSpark. So you do the math on that. I mean, that's a big amount. So let's hope CleanSpark goes up so we all can win. I'm also invested in CleanSpark as well. Mara, Riot as well, Strategy. Things are going to come back. Don't worry about it. Remain patient. Of course, take my information as a grain of salt. Always do your research. I definitely do think that Riot's going to have a big run up as well. People aren't really seeing that, but they're getting into that AI sector very soon. Oh yes, Coinbase. Coinbase. I mean, think about it. Every active investor right now is calling S&P 500, telling them to get Coinbase on their ETF. I mean, now that Coinbase is part of S&P 500, investors want to make money. Investors are going to bring in Coinbase to their ETF, and they can capitalize on the expense ratio. So Coinbase is the first crypto based company now that everyone is invested to when it comes to investing in, like their 401k, their Roth IRA, traditional IRA. Yeah. So when it comes to Riot, I really do think that at a minimum it can break through that. Riot has hit $12 for many months, $13, $15 perhaps. But remember what happened last bull cycle, from $3 to like $80. All right, so let's go, Katie, on the CleanSpark. Let's go, Halo Bomb on the Riot. I'm with you. Eon with Coinbase. Definitely Coinbase. You can think of Coinbase as like the safe haven investment, similar to like Bitcoin. If you believe in Bitcoin, Coinbase is like a similar type of a performance. It's not going away. Everyone has money in Coinbase. Uh, UNH has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but a stock I've been watching, thinking about dipping my toes in. United Healthcare. So yeah, that's a smart play. Why? Because of the technicals. I mean, people are like, it's kind of like that Warren Buffett approach. Be greedy when others are fearful. UNH went down so much. It's a big stock. Just based on technicals, relative strength shows that it's oversold. So that means that technicals indicate that price will eventually just bounce back. Kind of reminds me of like Netflix, when Netflix dropped like by a huge amount. It dropped by like 60, 70%. And then after that, what happened? Oh my gosh, Netflix now is back, back like in the the 4-digit range after that big drop. So thank you for sharing that, Katie. I've been seeing a lot of posts on UNH as well. But is anyone invested in, let's say, MetaPlanet or CEP? So I've been monitoring these stocks, and it's been painful because it's like, oh my gosh, I want to sprinkle in, and then I get too late to invest in it. CEP, I was watching that thing at $12. I wanted to buy it, but I didn't have funds available. And then MetaPlanet, I was looking at it at $4. It went up to 15. Still didn't get into it. But what's your take on CEP and MetaPlanet? Obviously, CEP right now, $46. Its top point was 60. We saw it hover around that 30, so it might pull back a little, back to like 35, 30. MetaPlanet was a big beast as well, going to 15 from $2. So the number one most traded stock in Japan, and a lot of people in the US have been buying it as well. But where the current price is at $7, we see a big time transition with the MACD, but then it went straight for reversal pattern on the hourly candle. So definitely some huge shorting after that big run up with MetaPlanet and Netflix. Yeah, Netflix. I mean, it's kind of like when you invest using the Warren Buffett strategy. I think one of the key things that we can take away from learning from Warren Buffett is like that infamous quote: "Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful." So UNH, for example. So be greedy when others are like turned off by UNH. Same strategy. You do that, you have a high chance of winning. And in the type of environment where you understand the business. So Warren Buffett, he kind of says he only invests in things that he understands. So companies like Netflix, you can understand Netflix because they changed how how Americans, even the whole world, how the whole world leverages, entertainment through Netflix technology, similar to like Amazon e-commerce, right? They transform e-commerce. Apple, I mean, half of the world uses Apple phones, so they've dominated that arena. I mean, we look at social media, Meta, Facebook, they've transformed that arena. And you look at Microsoft, I mean, that's more of the whole business enterprise. Netflix, you understand the business. Warren Buffett, he also buys more of those stable companies um, like Coca-Cola. People drink sodas, right? You understand that business. You see it everywhere. The branding's so strong, you get dividend payouts. And just on the near term, like what Katie is alluding to, Apple's getting pounded as well. Yeah, it really comes down to, following the goal for the United States to really bring back manufacturing in the United States, and that's US manufacturing, not having our phones manufactured in like, outside the country, and then you're paying a boatload for a company that's manufacturing a phone that they charge for thousands of dollars, and then on the back of it it says designed in Cupertino, California. It doesn't make sense. So you have it designed in the Silicon Valley, but you outsource that. How do you have that same, that quality touch? Not to say that other countries aren't capable of doing that, but it really just comes down to the law of gross domestic output. Having the United States dominate to become um, the country that manufactures, because right now it mainly comes down to countries like in Asia doing that. So yes, definitely some macro scale variables to consider as well, and that's what really disrupted the market on Friday with the tariff news. So how much impact do the tariffs have on miners? So there is some degree of impact, Scrooge. So great question there, because right when I said tariffs, I see a question pop up on tariffs, and I think Katie's the one that really kind of alluded to that with Apple getting pounded. Um, think about it when think about the devices that miners use, right? I mean, the end of life of that can last for 4 to 5 years, but what happens after that, like once the devices reach end of life? So you have seal miners that that's the latest and greatest technology, S21 Pro miners. So the fact that those countries are based out in like Singapore or like China, for example, so when miners have to buy and upgrade their rigs, I mean, it's not made in the United States. It's all, made outsourced out of the country. And right now, I mean, now is probably the best time to like upgrade your devices because of the extension with the tariffs. But after that, who knows what will happen? Right now, we're all operating on that, that extension with the months, the 3 months or the 90 days extension. So right now is the time to, use a Costco type number of purchase so you don't get impacted so much. So Katie went where I understand we need to manufacture in the U.S. even though we are the second largest manufacturer in the world. Thank God. Not That's not what I would want. Yeah, that's definitely a great point. I think it's setting up for the future for the United States. Like generation, Gen Z's, kids, growing up. So definitely, this is all positioning the United States to be the to gain strength and make it great again. Because right now, everything that we buy, nothing's really coming from the United States anymore. So that's a scary thing. When you look at it, it's kind of like when you look at economic power, it really comes down to gross domestic output, whether that's materials or service. And if the US GDP falls behind other countries like China, there has to be something that changes in order to get the GDP up. So I'm very grateful to hear about the changes. We've been having a lot of deals with Middle East as well. So I think Nvidia is very happy. Jensen Huang, his partnership with OpenAI in Saudi Arabia, United Emirates, all of those Middle East countries. It's definitely going to transform how we look at the Middle East. I think Europe. It's a little run down now. We used to think of Europe as like the prime real estate area, but just with how the laws work over there, it's becoming diluted with a lot of things that aren't expected. But now most of the direction is more towards innovation, AI, and that's all being positioned in like Middle East. So that's definitely something that's changed. We used to think of that area as like the war location with like bombs and everything. And of course it's still going on in certain countries in the Middle East, but it's great to see that now there's partnerships in that area to revive that area, to really change that and bring innovation. So that really helps change the world, how we look at it. So definitely very happy seeing how Trump is changing the world, and it's a win-win for the U.S. and for the Middle East countries like in Saudi Arabia, United Emirates. So definitely some upside there. And when we talk about HPC AI, we've heard about the partnership with SoftBank, OpenAI, like ChatGPT, Stargate project in Texas. So, that's $500 billion in Texas. So now companies like Riot, like Iron, the Bitcoin miners, they have mining capacity, they have energy wattage that is a big demand right now that companies are looking for, especially in the AI sector space. So I do think that there's going to be huge upside government incentives as soon as we hear strategic Bitcoin reserve being applied. All right. So what other questions do you guys have? I hope that this was a valuable live session. Any questions that anyone has, definitely can leave it in the chat. What are your thoughts with Bitcoin? How high do you think Bitcoin can go in this cycle? Currently, right now, price action is at 107,000. We're hovering up close to 108,000. So as we get into Memorial Day tomorrow, how high can it go? So Eon, with a question on Coinbase. So okay, so let me copy that question. That's a great question. I have an answer, and I'm going to give it right now before we search. Okay, so I'm just going to put this in the chat for ChatGPT to answer. But one of the competitors I see right now is Robinhood. But of course, Robinhood isn't even at that level that we see against Coinbase. But major competitors, according to ChatGPT, is Binance. Obviously, we know Binance. They have a big Bitcoin HODL. Okay, we have Kraken. It's U.S. based. We have Gemini. We have Robinhood, so I called that Robinhood. We have Crypto.com. We have Uniswap, Fidelity Digital Assets, Revolut. Okay, and then summary table. I mean the strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, Binance is a Chinese-based company. Fidelity is not really retail friendly. Robinhood, there's free trading, no self custody. So yeah, Coinbase is still a big dog in the crypto yard, especially for U.S. users and institutions. But competition is fierce and scrappy. If Coinbase is the Apple Store of crypto, the others range from cozy coffee shops to underground hacker dens. So that's the answer from ChatGPT. So I hope that gave you a nice overview of Coinbase. But I really do think that Coinbase is a safe play. Right when Coinbase got the update going into the S&P 500, it shot up by like 24% on that day. All right. So is anyone going to the Bitcoin conference this upcoming week? I'll be traveling to Las Vegas. I'll be attending the Bitcoin conference. So I'll be providing updates on that. It'll be my very first time attending a Bitcoin conference. So I'll definitely share back with everyone. But let's say if you're new to this channel and if you haven't already done so, turn on that bell notification for daily updates. Subscribe, and if you enjoy this, definitely support the channel. I'm trying to get to that 10,000 subscribers, so another 400 subscribers away to reach that milestone. So hopefully can break through that. So Alan, can you look at DeFi? So I'm not too sure what your question is on that. All right, guys. So it looks like we've gone over for about an hour now, but oh, thank you, Eon. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the energy and your questions. I hope that was valuable. Definitely be on the lookout for the daily updates with notifications turned on. I usually release videos like after work, towards the evening time, like 7 o'clock Pacific time. But every Sundays I do a live session. So um, any last question? If not, I will be doing a live session after the Bitcoin conference. So definitely next week, I'll share back on the experience with the Bitcoin conference, what I've gathered from, Bitcoin updates, where Bitcoin is headed, what type of updates are we getting from, the administration, how about the mining sector? We'll cover all of that. But once again, thank you all for joining. We've gone over an hour now. I hope you guys all enjoyed the content. I sure did with the dialogue. So just wanted to thank you all, and we'll do it again next week. Have a happy Memorial weekend. Take care, guys.